Yeah, no problem. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Week 14 edition of the Fantasy Ranking section, but also the weekly previews here that I'm doing with Jim Coventry every Wednesday and Thursday. Just a bit of a snafu change for this week. But Buymageddon Part 2, Jim, we're going to have to be dealing with that again. Of course, if you are in the fantasy playoffs this week, tough luck, NFL says to you, and I apologize to everyone that also has to be in that same spot. If you're fighting for the fantasy playoffs, we're going to do the best we can, but reminder, folks, as we get the show started, and also I'll be reminding throughout the time here that Jim does a bunch of weekly ranking stuff. I believe, is it still Sunday set for you that you're going to be doing that too?
Yes.
Cool.
11 a.m. Eastern.
11 a.m. Eastern, yep, going through all the ranking stuff. I would imagine you're getting a lot of sincere McCormick questions. You're going to get some from me, Jim, because that's the level of which we might be dealing with Buymageddon Part 2 with the streamers and running back position overall. But let's start first with the game that is near and dear to my heart. I will be on SiriusXM tonight, Channel 87, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Not only because I needed a distraction if and when the Packers were to lose to the Lions, but that Nick Whalen will keep me company in the event that occurs. And it's a massive game from a divisional perspective. Of course, the Lions have effectively a 2-game lead on the Packers right now in the standings, but their rest of season schedule pretty difficult. Packers kind of the same boat. They had the Vikings and Bears to play too, but got through their harder part of the schedule, and that schedule kind of lost some teeth with the injuries to the Niners and now the injuries and a massive amount of the injuries to the Lions this week. I believe there are 15 players on injured reserve for Detroit entering this matchup, and the projected 7 of the projected top 8 defensive linemen are out entering Thursday. So at the beginning of the year, the top 7 defensive linemen for the Lions not playing in this contest. That screams to me a Josh Jacobs game and a game in which the Packers offense can be really effective, but will they, Jim?
Well, I got to one-up you here. Losing a lineman is important. They're without their 3 top linebackers, and they were all excellent run defenders. This was one of the best run defenses in the league. Right now, look, the NFL is a week-to-week league. The Lions, when I look at every team in the league, their defense is the most injured unit in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So realistically, their corners are okay. But if they're not getting the pass rush, if they're not getting run defense, we saw the Bears in the second half on Thanksgiving carve them up. The turkey. Nice. Look, the Packers moved the ball well when they last played the Lions. It's going to be easier in this game. You're right. Josh Jacobs should have a game here because the run game is schemed exceptionally well. And we also know the middle of the field, the coverage, the linebackers are an important part of coverage. And the Packers are without Romeo Doubs here, and that doesn't help. But they should have no issues moving the ball here on the ground with Tucker Kraft. If they decide to involve Jaden Reed, don't know why they don't every week, but they could kill this team in the middle of the field.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Last game, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, played in the elements. There was a lot of rain and coldness involved in that, and you would have thought that benefits the Frozen Tundra team. The Packers, really, during the Mike McCarthy era and certainly the LaFleur, have been more of the finesse team. So you enter in a dome spot where the defense is really limited with a bunch of different injuries. That sets up the Packers offense to look really good to the point where you're the Lions, you have an established identity, you want to run the ball, you want to control the tempo, you don't want to expose Jared Goff. You might not have that choice. Not that I'm saying it's going to look exactly like the Bengals defense does every single week, but we saw comments from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase effectively saying if they don't score a touchdown every possession, they feel like they're going to lose. I almost wonder if that's the attitude that the offense of the Lions is going to have tonight.
Yeah, now the Lions are going to be without left tackle Taylor Decker again. They got away with it against the Bears, and they might get away with it against the Packers. Neither of those teams have exceptional pass rushes, so they might lock out here. The run game's still going to be solid. That run blocking line is still excellent. They still got Montgomery and Gibbs, and the Packers are without their middle linebacker, Edgerrin Cooper. Now, the loss of Cooper is important because he's a pretty athletic linebacker, and we saw in the first meeting, the Lions were shredding, isolating linebackers in coverage. They're going to do that again. And no, Edgerrin Cooper does not help here. So I think that's going to be, there's going to be a shootout. And the success on the ground is going to be there. And I know St. Brown plays halftime outside, halftime slot, but they'll run him a lot of in-breakers. They'll get Laporta involved. This is going to be a game where neither team is probably putting up much resistance. Jair Alexander is out as well, for what it's worth.
Yep. And we saw last Thursday the middle of the field just get victimized by the Dolphins offense, and Jonnu Smith was doing well. You had a few Jalen Waddle receptions. Devon Achane was doing things. The Dolphins are one of the best teams in the league at uniquely exposing that area, no matter how good your defense is. But That's the vulnerability that you see without Edgerrin Cooper, and Quay Walker is still not great in coverage. He's getting better, at least from the PFF side of things. I think the Packers are going to end up bringing pressure almost by default. Let's try to get Jared Goff off his spot. Let's see if we can generate some sort of miscue or miscommunication. And that's the way in which you steal a possession and therefore have the advantage in this game. Because again, you talk about it might be whoever has the ball last wins it. I thought that was going to be the case a couple of weeks ago when the Packers Lions played. It wasn't, and that was part of the elements. Well, that shouldn't be a factor this time around. Over under 51.5. I think the over is the call, even though it's a massive number. Do you agree?
I'm saying, yeah, I'm on the over on this one. I hate going that high, but look, this is a game that could near 60 points. And look, the fact both teams like to run the ball, it's not a bad thing. There could be a lot of explosive runs on the ground for both teams. So it's not like, oh, we're running 3-4 yards a carry, grind the clock. Really, that's not the way it's going to work here.
Yeah, we rarely do this, and it doesn't take too much intuition to get there. I think Jake Bakes and Brandon McManus, if they're available waiver wire wise for kickers, are actually in a prime spot this week because even if a team doesn't score a touchdown, I believe both these teams are going to be in position to score points, not just touchdowns, but field goals often. So consider that again, even though it's a Thursday game, it always makes me a little nervous to play kickers because if they get 4, you're like, oh man, this really stinks. I'm not feeling great about it. But we spent a lot of time on this one. It's one of the bigger matchups of the Week 14 slate. Let's turn over to a divisional matchup that doesn't really matter as much anymore. Jets versus Dolphins, this one in Miami. We'll have to see the stats of Tyreek Hill. It seems like he's going to play. Breece Hall has been pretty disappointing the past couple of weeks, really all season long, depending where you draft them at. But I think this is a scenario that you're going to see the Jets at some point try to prove that they're not complete bottom feeders. You look at the other teams that are around them in the Tankathon standings, it's like the Titans and Jaguars and Giants. You're like, yeah, all those teams stink. Wait, what's happening here with the Jets that have all the talents and defense and offense? Well, it certainly seems like there's some bad vibes, as we've been mentioning all year long. The Dolphins should probably own New York this week. I don't see any scenario in which the Jets suddenly turn things around when they haven't already in the past month.
I mean, the only thing you got going for here, it's a divisional battle, and we never know how these are going to go. But you're right, Joe. I mean, we talked about it. When Robert Saleh left, the defense lost his heart, and they're not playing nearly the level they played at when Saleh was there, and that's a thing. And Sauce Gardner's not been playing at an exceptional level, and I know DJ Reed got banged up last week. We'll see how that cooks out. But offensively, whatever it is with Aaron Rodgers, that's just some mojo that's not working. And I believe it's him because anyway, he's squeamish to pressure. And Miami doesn't get a lot, but I think they're going to send some extra bodies here because I think everybody knows at this point, if Aaron Rodgers thinks pressure is coming, he's getting out of quick. And the accuracy of his throws has been brutal. He had some easy throws against Seattle last week, and he was not close to them because he was expecting pressure to come, not necessarily having pressure come. And so I think Miami is going to see that and go after that.
That's an important distinction and a great point. I agree. From the Dolphins side of things, you're playing all the studs. I guess the question would be, is Tyreek Hill out there for you? And you might have to at this point. If you're somehow debating this and Tyreek Hill matters in your league, kudos to you because you survived a lot from a draft capital perspective and the disappointment he has done relative to other receivers. He caught the effective junk time touchdown and also fluky touchdown against the Packers last week, which salvaged his fantasy day. We know the Jets secondary is good on paper. We've talked about now in past shows that they haven't actually lived up to that status. So is Tyreek Hill still an automatic start for you?
You know what? He has at least 9.8 PPR points in 6 straight games. It's not great, but it's not a terrible floor. So there's that. And in the last 3 games, he has a 20 and a 19. So that said, he's going to get some targets. He's not getting double-digit targets. That's the way it is. He gets 6 to 9 targets in many games. There's a game with a 4 and a 5 in there. So, but I think you got to play him. They use him in the red zone, like you said, and he's getting enough done. Not a week winner, but I don't think he's a liability at this point.
Yeah. All right. Are you good to move on to the next game?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. There's not a lot to talk about when it comes to the AFC East with the Bills, the way they're running things now. Revenge game narrative that I'm very excited for, although he has to actually perform to that level, is Kirk Cousins going back to his former team in the Minnesota Vikings, who sit at 10-2. We talked so much about the Packers Lions, and Packers are third in the division right now because the Vikings, no matter what, just continue to win football games. So we'll have to see if that ends up occurring this time around. Now, if there's one person that knows the Brian Flores defense intimately, it should be Kirk Cousins, but yet this is the guy that threw 4 interceptions last week. We had some nice advanced stats. I'm not sure if you saw, he had the lowest average throw or either highest velocity throw all season long. It was like under 36 miles per hour, which seems silly that we're clocking that stuff, but he made some poor decisions against the Chargers, and the Chargers did nothing and still won the game pretty convincingly. So I wonder if we're going to just see the same thing. Like, is it time that we're going to see Michael Penix soon, or can Kirk Cousins figure it out against his former team this week?
Man, it's tough call. And the first thing with Penix, I know the fantasy people really wanted him to be a thing. I don't know if he's good. And they'll know in practice. They'll know what they've seen on the scout team. If they really believe he's the deal, well, then they might get him in. But I always thought, and look, I get it that Jaden Daniels surprised me. I didn't really see that coming. But a lot of these older quarterbacks that have a big year in their last year, they're usually not good quarterbacks. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. They'll determine that. But Kirk Cousins, well, this same thing with Aaron Rodgers. They're similar. Neither can move anymore. And it's so bad with Cousins. They can't do play action because it really requires, it looks dumb. It's a little athleticism to fake the end and run backwards. It's athleticism. He doesn't have that. They're not using it. They can't roll him out. And so the Vikings, like you said, he may know the defense, but just like Rodgers, the Vikings are the team that will give you perceived pressure. It doesn't get home, but they just send bodies from nowhere and then they back them off. And once the quarterback sees, oh, something's coming here, their process gets sped up. And Cousins, that's his Achilles heel. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Wrong words. But it is his Achilles heel at this point. Perceived pressures like Aaron Rodgers. And that's what he's going to see here. So, and it's a terrible matchup for Bijan Robinson on the ground because Minnesota's been an elite run defense. Drake London will get his. They moved him in the slot more last week. I didn't count the snaps, but he usually plays like 30-ish% there. When I was watching, he was like always in the slot. So he's going to be fine. Kyle Pitts wasn't even used.
Yeah.
So look, this is not a good day for Kirk Cousins here. And I'm not excited about him here, but start Drake London, start Bijan Robinson, but the ceiling may not be where it's at. But yeah, I'm not excited about the Vikings offense.
I'm selfishly asking this question, not because I don't want to watch your Sunday show and try to sneak in a question with weekly rankings, but I have to play Kirk Cousins in a league that matters from a fantasy playoff perspective this week. It's Kirk Cousins, Jameis Winston against the Steelers. Obviously, he threw for over 400 yards against the Broncos last week. Or Cooper Rush against the Bengals defense, which might make you look good, Jim, at this point in the season. So, like, is that the level in which fantasy managers who have Kirk Cousins need to go down to, that the Cooper Rushes and Jameis Winstons are the better plays?
I might start Cooper Rush in that one because the Bengals stop the run. They can't stop the pass. Trey Hendrickson's very good, but they don't get as much of a pass rush as a team at all. So I think they can roll him out away from that. And you know what, though? I will tell you this. If CD Lamb's status, and I know it's a Monday night game, if CD Lamb is clear to go, start Rush. Otherwise, you got to go with Jameis. Jameis had success against Pittsburgh. I believe he played them before. He had
2 weeks ago. That was in the blizzard in the second half of that game. I'm not sure if you were calling it, but I do, because it was a cool visual one. He had the rushing touchdown and a couple more rushing yards. Didn't do great passing wise, but that was part of the conditions. I think that the Steelers defense is obviously really good, but Winston can produce. We just saw last week in I think a tougher defense, the Broncos, where he goes nuclear fantasy wise.
So I was pointing out on a different show that, look, they did it with Joe Flacco last year. They're doing the same thing with Winston. They're just big arm quarterback, and Flacco really isn't that, but he kind of perceives that. Just get it out. Just get the ball out. And that's what they're doing. They're getting the ball out, and they're going to throw. They're not a running team. They're a throwing team. So, yeah, so Winston, if CD Lamb's not playing for Cooper Rush, then I think go with Jameis Winston and call it a day.
All right. And then again, I was just to contextualize for a lot of folks. We're asking Kirk Cousins, Cooper Rush, or Jameis Winston. We're talking about the real dregs of the fantasy quarterback spot, and that's where Kirk Cousins lies. The other side of this match, the Vikings are favored by 5.5. That seems like a high-ish number, given the Falcons on paper should produce points. But again, we talked about Kirk Cousins' limitations. From the Viking side of things, you've been fine enough with Aaron Jones. Justin Jefferson's been a disappointment, but you can't really bench him, not in this matchup. And then Jordan Addison is kind of in that wide receiver 2 range, flex range, where you'd like to have better places. That you'd love to say, well, if Westbrook-Akine or Marquez Valdes-Scantling score touchdowns, obviously I want to play him over Jordan Addison. But the issue with those two guys is you don't know. Theoretically, they shouldn't score a touchdown every single week. So is Jordan Addison still kind of in that must-play territory for you?
It's not in the must-play category, but, man, it's hard to find 35 receivers that are better than him each week. So you're playing them if you're in a 3-receiver league for sure. Here's what I want you to know. Sam Darnold has, and I honestly, I'm not making this stuff up because I'm talking about pressure for every quarterback, but these specific last 3 were really that. Yeah. So Sam Darnold this year, when teams don't pressure him, he has been beautiful, like literally like lights out. Well, guess what Atlanta doesn't get? They don't get pressure. They brought Matt Judon in last year. It didn't make a difference. They get none. And so this is a game where Darnold will be clean. That means this whole offense is going to function. And like you, it was hard to pick the point spread on this game. But the more I unravel this game, Cousins exactly is in the spot where we don't want him, which is going to be under pressure, perceived pressure. And then the opposite is Darnold is going to be clean, which means I think that the Vikings probably win this game handily.
Yeah, they should have won a couple of these games a bit more handily, and yet it somehow has come down to last possession. So that's the only thing that's in my mind. That and the narrative thing. Not that the Falcons should get up to help their guy Kirk Cousins beat his former team. They shouldn't have any attachment to make Kirk Cousins look better, nor should Kirk Cousins just turn on a switch. But that stuff happens. For whatever reason, it happens all the time in the NFL, and it's in the back of my head. It's, I guess, the dark voice that I don't want to listen to, but it still keeps chiming in a little bit. Hey, what if Kirk Cousins looks good for the first time in a month? Stop it.
Right?
Okay, yes, that's where we're at. All right, before the voices in my head continue to get any louder, let's get to the Saints and Giants. In the game that, boy, this is about as brutal as a match they can get. Kudos to the Saints for remaining competitive despite all the injury stuff with the Lions side of things. It feels like the Saints have gotten 3 years worth of injuries overall this season. They traveled to New York, fair by 4.5 points, which I thought was an interesting line. And then I look at the rest of the Giants team. Now no Dexter Lawrence. He was placed in injured reserve. That's a massive loss, and the defense that already was hemorrhaging pieces. I think the Saints will win. Do I think they win by 4.5? That makes me a little bit tough. You want to stay away from this game as much as possible. And yet, Tyrone Tracy, there's Wan'Dale Robinson, especially with 6 teams on bye, you might have to consider. I mean, Marquez Valdes-Scantling on the other side of things. There's enough people that we need to discuss that a game that I will not watch and refuse to partake in it at all is going to have some significant fantasy ramifications.
You know, funny enough, Joe, the Saints are one of my 3 best bets of the week. I'm going to do that in the Bookies live show today. And since Darren Rizzi, the special team coach, took over as head coach, they're playing hard. And you can't necessarily quantify it. But when you watch them play, they are a different team. They are playing the intensity has changed significantly. And this isn't the most talented team. But to go from what they were to what they are now, it's a big deal. But here's where the game's going to be won most likely for the Saints. You mentioned Dexter Lawrence being out. Now, that run defense had been brutal for like 5 weeks for the Giants. And I told people, start last week, start Rico Dowdle. It was a game for Dowdle. Well, no Dexter Lawrence. He was the one run defender left that they could count on. And without him, the ripple effect gets even worse. And the one thing, the Saints can run block. The system is set up well. They're capable of doing that. This is a big Alvin Kamara game. And if you're in a 6 teams on bye, and look, you got to wait till like Saturday or Sunday to make this decision. But I think Kendre Miller is going to be involved here because Darren Rizzi said, well, he ain't in my doghouse. He was in Dennis Allen, but he ain't in mine. And so he's going to be supposed to be cleared. If he's cleared, I think he gets some carries here. Again, 6 teams on bye. If you're desperate for a body at running back, it might pan out into something. That said,
can we hold on? Because I want to, this is actually really great because there are a lot of people that are probably dealing with this. Let's say Sincere McCormick, who we had Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Raiders, talk about, he needs to get more touches than when he has the past 2 weeks, 5 and 12. So more than 12 would say, well, that's your phrase, volume is king. By default, McCormick would be a pickup. Would you play McCormick over Kendre Miller in that instance?
The tough thing is, and I told people also to kind of jump on the Sincere McCormick train, but if they clear Alexander Madison, is it going to be McCormick getting all the work? Or is it going to be a timeshare? It's nerve-wracking. I do like the idea of Sincere McCormick. And right now, today, I would play him over Kendre Miller because Kendre Miller, look, we don't know what his role is going to be.
Okay, so I got 2 more. Kenny Gainwell, we'll get to the Eagles playing the Panthers, double-digit point favorites. Obviously, Saquon's been awesome. Jim and Nick on either the Tuesday or Monday XM show had talked about, I don't mind the idea that in a blowout scenario, the Eagles would then use Kenny Gainwell, who might fall into the end zone. Would a Kenny Gainwell over Kendre Miller make sense?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, predicting a blowout is not bad. The Eagles have won 4 of their last 7 games by at least 17 points. And we'll talk about the Panthers game later. So when we get there, we'll talk about that in detail. But as of right now, yeah, Kenny Gainwell probably gets you 8-ish touches, and that would be useful.
And the other one I was thinking about, Kamani Vidal. Now, I was all in on Kamani Vidal last week. He was on our waiver wire show, one of the top guys that I liked, and I liked him over Gus Edwards when I was talking with Jake Tarsky. Now, neither Gus Edwards nor Kamani Vidal did a whole lot because the Chargers said, hey, Kirk Cousins, if you want to just give us the game, we're totally fine with that. And Kirk Cousins said, absolutely, I'm a good enough guy. I'll be happy to do it. I have a Netflix show. Here's a football win that you guys didn't deserve. So Vidal, I think, is the more explosive back, but they didn't even get involved as a pass catcher, which was weird to me because Dobbins was getting at least 3 targets a game prior to it. So Vidal or Kendre Miller is an interesting question too.
As of right now, I would, again, if Kendre Miller's going to be active, we got to wait to find that out. I would go Kendre Miller in this one. The Giants are so bad defensively. And look, I just didn't see enough. That interior offensive line for the Chargers, it's hard to run inside, and they don't scheme up. Like J.K. Dobbins was great to get into the edge, but I think he's a different level of player than Vidal is. And I think McConkey hurt his knee as well as his shoulder.
Yeah.
The Chiefs might be able to just pack it up closer to the line and just kind of say, look, you ain't moving the ball here. We're going to do your little conservative attack, not working here. So I would very much be worried about the Chargers rushing attack here.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I actually picked up Sincere McCormick over Vidal in another must-win league. Thanks, NFL, for making Jonathan Taylor have a Week 14 bye before I need to get in the playoffs. Real cool, guys. All right, not much more to say about the Saints-Giants from that perspective. I think it's fair to move on. Let's go to that Panthers-Eagles game. Eagles favored by 12.5. This is in Philly, obviously, and they've looked fantastic. Won a massive game against the Ravens last week. They could very well be the number 1 seed when it's all said and done in the NFC. Looking at the Lions' schedule and the attrition that they had to deal with on the defense, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And yet there's the Nick Sirianni element that makes me a little bit worried. We always have to be concerned if Saquon Barkley were to get injured. What does this offense look like? And he's been a catalyst for things. But now, more importantly, at least for the spread side, Bryce Young has looked good. I had written him off. To be fair, Jim, I had written him off when he was drafted because the concept of a 5'8" quarterback never made sense to me, especially one that was not named Drew Brees. So I was not necessarily dancing on the grave of Bryce Young, but I felt very confident in my assessment that he would not be a quarterback in the NFL. I've been proven wrong over the past 3 weeks, and I thought the Buccaneers game, despite the defense being really bad, that looked like NFL caliber throws, decision-making, and awareness of the pocket, all things that we really hadn't seen through the first 16 games of last year, his rookie year.
I don't want to take anything away from Bryce Young because I said earlier in the year, he doesn't look like he belonged in an NFL roster. Right now, he looks like he belongs in an NFL roster. I'm going to give him that, and I'm going to give him a lot of credit because he's way different, and I think Dave Canales probably helped figure some things out. Here's what I want to point out. In the games that Bryce Young has looked good, New Orleans, not a good defense, and I don't think Darren Rizzi had taken over yet at that point either. So I think there was that. And then they played the Giants. Yeah. Giants are awful. Then Kansas City. On paper, they're a good defense. That pass defense has fallen apart. Since Jalen Watson went on the IR, they can't defend outside receivers. If you saw that game, these were bored like David Moore, like wide open. So it was an easy pitch and catch game. And then Tampa Bay, we know they can't cover anybody. So give Bryce Young credit. Love the young guy. But now they're playing Philly. And those 4 games were at home, Joe. Those are 4 straight home games they played.
Wow. Crazy.
Right? Think about a schedule anomaly, right? That's crazy. All 4 at home. And now they're going to go on the road to Philly. Philly gets pressure, and Bryce Young he holds the ball too long, but he's able to get away with it in these last few games. I don't think with Philly get away with it. I think they're going to fall far enough behind where they're going to have to become one-dimensional. I think that's going to work against it. These other games have all been close, so they've had the threat of being able to run. And I think the coverage group for Philadelphia is elite. Vic Fangio is a master. I think there's a big comeuppance here.
All right, so that feels like what the Commanders did to the Titans last week. Like, oh, well, the Titans have come in hanging around, and Will Levis is doing a little bit better. Oh, no, this was just the better team that smashed the bad team. And in this instance, it's the Eagles doing the same thing to the Panthers. By the way, that does not mean that Bryce Young will be bad or that what has happened over the past 3 weeks is a regression. Bryce Young had these matchups last year and still didn't look like the caliber of quarterback we saw outside of my Packers and Joe Barry's defense last year, which made him still have a job. Thank goodness for Joe Barry and that he's not there anymore for Green Bay. So you're all in on the Eagles, kind of taking care of business. Adam Thielen was a top waiver wire pickup for us on the waiver wire show Tuesday. Was at 26% rostered on Yahoo leagues. I know in the leagues that you and I play in, he's been picked up for weeks now, but is Thielen a guaranteed? Yeah, there you go. Is Thielen a play this week, though, given how great that secondary is and really the defense overall for the Eagles?
I think he still is, because Thielen still navigates the slot with Coker back. And I know Coker played a lot of slots, 6'3", 208, but I think it's natural that Coker has to go to the outside. Thielen has to stay in the slot. It kind of has to be that way. They can't put Thielen on the outside. It would hurt their team to do that. And I think when the pressure comes, I think that hot read, Thielen is very savvy at getting open quickly. He does have a connection with Bryce Young back to last year. He's old, but his legs are fresh because he hasn't played most of the season. So I do think he continues to get high PPR volume.
Other question would be then Chuba Hubbard. Now, in the event where the Eagles are dominating, you'd theoretically want your pass catching running back. Well, that shouldn't matter because Chuba Hubbard has been all good at that this year. And last week, we finally started to see Jonathan Brooks get a bit more involved. He became the pass catching running back for that team. Now, Chuba Hubbard had that bad fumble. He still gets plenty of work. Are we getting to the point where Chuba Hubbard needs to be a bit more phased out of lineups, or at least he's not an automatic play?
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard's been an excellent player. Volume has really, really helped his cause a lot. But I think right now we're seeing a little bit difference. Where it's 21% of the snaps for Jonathan Brooks last week after 9% the week prior. I think he cuts in more. I think now instead of 80% for Hubbard, we're down to like maybe 65%. It's a very, very difficult matchup. And if Brooks is going to be the receiving back, as we kind of saw and you mentioned earlier, that's going to hurt Hubbard because that PPR volume was helpful to him as well. So, look, Hubbard is still in that RB2 range, but he's not in that high RB2, low RB1 range. I just think that move is taking place right now.
Okay, let's move over to the Steelers and Browns game. We've already talked about a little bit. Steelers favored by 6.5. Vegas is begging you to tease that in a 7-point teaser to make it now close to a pick'em contest. Of course, the Browns won that matchup last week, 2 weeks ago, I should say, in the blizzard. Jameis Winston looked pretty good. Winston had a massive fantasy day against the Broncos on Monday night last week, despite the 2 pick sixes, which hopefully God will help fix for him this week around. Someone in the chat asked about Cedric Tillman. I think it's fair because I've been wondering Tillman too. Now, the idea is he's going to be activated off the concussion protocol after missing the past 2 weeks. We assume he's going to play with Elijah Moore and with Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy went from 30th in receiving yards prior to that Bronco game to 5th in receiving yards after his monster performance. Does Tillman take away from all three, or is there enough volume even in this matchup against this defense where you can say Tillman, Jeudy, and Elijah Moore all obvious starts for this week?
I mean, if Tillman is there, I still think Tillman's their number one guy. And I know people fight with Jerry Jeudy. I think Tillman, especially the downfield, he's their downfield guy. So Jeudy, from a PPR perspective, I think still holds more value. I think Elijah Moore does see a drop in volume. He sees less snaps than the other ones. Elijah Moore usually plays about 70% of the snaps, where Tillman and Jeudy play over 90% of the snaps. And I do think now Pittsburgh has that pass rush, so maybe getting the ball downfield might not be as easy here. But Denver had a good pass rush, not Pittsburgh level, and we still saw them uncorking it. So, look, if Tillman's in there, I still think Tillman is that player. He got caught in a bad matchup in his last game with Denver before he got hurt. I believe.
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah,
and that was a bad matchup, so it just didn't work out. But the Pittsburgh corners are not the Denver corners, so I would play Tillman with confidence. More, look, if you're in a PPR league, flex, and hope he catches you 5 passes. But if Tillman's back, it does cut into the pie because David Njoku's very involved.
Yeah, and Jeudy is too. I mean, there's just a volume perspective of things. And from the other side, I think Najee Harris an obvious play. George Pickens is an obvious play. I've seen Russell Wilson. I think Jeff Erickson listed Russell Wilson as quarterback 7 this week, which I think is high. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. What he did against the Bengals defense. Again, Jim, I think you could do that against the Bengals defense at this point with the way they're playing. Is Russell Wilson really a top 10 quarterback this week?
6 teams off could certainly help the case for that. I won't be as aggressive. Now, here's what I will say works in his favor. Cleveland has those 3 names at cornerback. They have been busting coverages all year long, like downfield. They're decent short and intermediate. They are not good downfield. Guess where, when Pittsburgh's offense runs properly, guess where they really want Russ throwing? Deep. Deep. And that's George Pickens. Now, Myles Garrett, I don't know what's up with him, but his foot did not look right on Monday night. And if his foot's an issue and that pass rush isn't coming, all of a sudden Russ has more time. They traded away Zadarius Smith about a month ago. So, in theory, if Myles Garrett is going to be limited on that foot, watch the injury report. If he's even limited in practice, that means he's not going to be right for this game. He's going to play. He's not going to be right. And I think at that point, you can make an upside case for Wilson. I would be more likely to put him at like quarterback 13, 14 than 7.
Okay, and that's where I'm at too. I mean, there's going to be a number of other guys streaming candidate wise we talked about. We've already mentioned with Jameis Winston. Is Winston higher than Russell Wilson in your mind?
That's going to be really close because the
I
matchups
agree.
are the matchups not good for Winston. And but I think they're going to have to. I would put Winston ahead of him. I would put Winston ahead of him because he's going to throw. If Pittsburgh heads it their way, they will run the ball, and if they get a lead, they'll run the ball. It's more likely Pittsburgh has a lead than Cleveland has a lead, and in that case, then Winston throws more than Wilson, and I'd give Winston the edge.
I love that. That's great analysis. You and I play in a lot of different leagues, a lot of different formats. What I'm seeing more in the industry leagues is less punishment for turnovers. I don't know if that's right or wrong from a scoring perspective, but in those leagues that you're playing in where there are effectively only 1 point or 2 point loss if a player has a turnover, yeah, Winston is obviously far more significant play of Russ Wilson. So,
I saw Charlene in the chat mention that Pickens might go off. Yeah, this would in theory be a Pickens game because stylistically it could not be a better matchup for the downfield stuff he likes to do.
Yeah, let's go over to the Raiders Buccaneers game. We talked about how the Steelers are favored by 6.5. Vegas is begging you to tease that one. Well, Buccaneers favored by 6.5 too. I wonder if it's a 1-for-1 tease they want to have us there. We have mentioned a lot about Sincere McCormick. We'll have to see about the stats of both Alexander Madison. I guess I don't know about Zamir White either, or if it even matters. It's the other frustrating part of the Raiders backfield. So I don't want to go into more of that. And obviously the awesomeness of Brock Bowers is there. I guess tease for the love-hate video, which we post on this very network either today or tomorrow. I think Jacoby Myers is like an automatic play this week, and especially against this defense for the Buccaneers, who have been giving up passing production to everyone. You basically have to have Jacoby Myers in your lineup, PPR or otherwise.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers, he's literally like a PPR wide receiver too right now. And whether it was Aiden O'Connell or it was Minshew before them, it's very clear the Raiders coaching staff is kind of figured out. Get the ball to Bowers, get the ball to Myers. Anybody else is an afterthought. And I think that's the way you have to look at this thing. But yeah, Jacoby Myers is an excellent fantasy play. I have him at wide receiver 26 because but I could make a case for going I have the wrong week's rankings. Look at last week's rankings. Had a little family stuff going on this week, so I'm a little bit behind on that. But I'll tell you, I have him very high in the rankings. I'll tell you later where I have him. But he's an excellent play this week.
Jeff Erickson has Myers at like 18, and I think I might even push him a bit higher. I talked about how he's effectively over all the Jalen Waddles of the world, which is fine. You don't really want to play Jalen Waddle anyway. But like Cedric Tillman, who we like a lot, and theoretically gets back this week, Myers was way more obvious to play. And I think full point PPR often, but there couldn't be a better spot for both Brock Bowers, who again is obvious number one tight end, but also Myers too.
Yeah, I got him at 19, but I could easily move him ahead of Smith and Jigba, easily ahead of Tyreek Hill, easily ahead of Devontae Adams. I can easily move him ahead of those guys. But still, we still have him in a strong wide receiver 2 rank.
I guess I'm asking this because I don't understand. Pick up Shepard with Nico out. I don't know who Padzilla is referring to with Nico because I checked Nico Collins, doesn't matter, and we're talking about Baker with the Buccaneers snap. Okay. Thank you, goodness. That you just know the listeners and the viewers so well. Good job, Jim.
All these start-sit questions I answer.
Way too early in the morning, I guess 10:30 for me, and I can't figure that out. Yes, thank you. With Nico on bye. Okay, so pick up Shepard. There's a number of receivers that I would like instead, but I guess it depends on who's out there. Is Shepard a guy that you're liking this week?
Yeah, Shepard will get you 5 to 7 targets in a best case scenario. What he does with those, you count on 3 to 4 catches, 35-ish yards. Probably not a great chance to score. Mike Evans is back, and he will hog those red zone targets. And obviously, Cade Otton's a factor down there. And Bucky Irving, his hip should be fine. So, you look at desperation play. I get it. You'll get some PPR points out of him. But yeah, if that's the best option out there, then go ahead and roll with it.
Yeah, I don't know what was wrong with me, Padzilla. That's why Jim Coventry is the best, because he just understands exactly what all the listeners are looking for. Appreciate you filling in for my brain fart there. We got 6 games yet to go, so let's move on to Jacksonville, Tennessee. And frankly, we could just move right off it because it's not a whole lot there. Trevor Lawrence on injured reserve. Now Mac Jones there. Somebody in the chat had asked, do you play Tony Pollard over David Montgomery? And I think that's a fair question. Pollard over David Montgomery. I mean, both these guys are like top 10 running backs. My argument, but can you have both? But in this scenario where you can only play Pollard against Jacksonville or Montgomery against the Packers defense, where are you leaning towards?
Look, I love Tony Pollard, and he needs volume to get going. Now, look, Tyjae Spears had missed some time. When Spears missed time, we see Pollard get a lot of work. Now, last week, Pollard was back, and Spears was back and Pollard still got a decent amount of work, David Montgomery is inevitable. His floor is what puts him in your weekly lineup. The fact he's getting double-digit carries behind that line, Green Bay's not a good run of his, the likelihood of him having a shot to score a touchdown in the red zone is high. The safety of Montgomery is better than taking the risk that Pollard has a game. And look, love Pollard, love the matchup. But David Montgomery has nothing working against him here. And in that scenario, I just think you take those safe points because Montgomery always has 2 to 3 touchdown upside in him. I don't think you can sit him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That was a bit of Chris Collinsworth impersonation I heard from you there. Look, Jim, I love Tony Pollard. I love that guy, Tony Pollard. I can't do impersonations. You did a great job with it, Jim. Thank you for bringing that out. From the Titans side of things, offensively, Westbrook-Ikine has now evolved into the point where you have to consider him. Somebody was asking Chigakonkwo with 6 teams on bye over Mike Gesicki. I would like as little shares of the Titans offense as possible. You realistically might not have that option, though, with 6 teams on bye.
Westbrook-Ikine has 20 receptions. 8 of them, I believe 8, have resulted in touchdowns. I don't know what to tell you. It will dry up. It will dry up. He's not Randy Moss. He's Nick Westbrook-Ikine. He's been in the league 5 years. He's always done something when he's on the field, but he's Nick Westbrook-Ikine. Those touchdowns, and when they dry up, they're going to dry up hard. And that's all I can tell you. If you feel the luck rolling, keep rolling, get about it. He plays almost every snap. He usually gets close to 6 targets. They're coming from Will Levis. There's that. Some of the touchdowns have been nice contested catches. Some have been busted coverages. They will not keep getting him touchdowns. A, they're not scoring that many points. B, they have Calvin Ridley, who's eventually going to get some. So play him at your peril, but at least he's on the field and he's getting targets.
I made the case with Jake Latarski on the Tuesday waiver wire show. It feels like, and I'm very bad at just overall Vegas, going to Vegas, doing Vegas things, whatever else. But I'm bad at Vegas. So you guys in the chat and you, Jim, can tell me I'm wrong. But it feels like when you hit red at the roulette table, first time you're like, all right, we'll put another 50 on the red again, hits again. It's still 50-50 odds that's red or black. And you're like, is red really going to hit a third straight time? That's what it feels like we're doing with Westbrook-Ikine and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. At some point, they aren't going to keep scoring touchdowns. And when that happens, we're in a bad spot.
It ain't red or black, Joe. You're betting green. You're betting the 0. And the 0 is hit 7 weeks out of 8. It's not red or black. Is that better?
That's a lot better. Like I said, you're better at Vegas than I am, Jim. Just overall, that's great. All right, let's go over to the Seahawks Cardinals game. A game that matters a lot from the NFC West perspective. These two teams played just a bit ago. This one now in Arizona. Cardinals favored by 2.5. If the Cardinals are to win, they turn 7-6. Seahawks are then 7-6, and we're right back at the, I don't know what we're going to do with the NFC West. Maybe it doesn't matter with the NFC playoff and the way the Lions and Eagles seem to be performing, and as well as the NFC North teams. But this matters a lot from a divisional perspective. Seahawks defense got a number on Kyler Murray just a couple weeks ago. You had the Devin Witherspoon. It was a pick 6, or at least close to it. I guess I'm forgetting the play right now.
I can't remember the dude who returned a touchdown. I can't remember his name, but it wasn't Witherspoon. Witherspoon chased him down.
Witherspoon. Yeah, he was the blocking for it. Oh, yes. Whatever. Thank you. Seahawks defense has looked significantly better since they acquired Ernest Jones in trade and has turned things around entirely. I'm surprised that Mike McDonald's defense needed to have Ernest Jones to be unlocked. But we even saw this last year. You think about Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love, for example. LaFleur kind of had to just say, F it. We're going to make Jordan Love a thing or he's going to sink. And maybe Mike McDonald's doing the same thing with the defense, and Ernest Jones matters a lot. So what's your thoughts on this matchup just overall? Not even so much a fantasy perspective.
Well, first of all, the Ernest Jones thing is important because what McDonald likes to do is set what we call simulated pressures, players from all over. And that means blitzing linebackers at times. Ernest Jones is an excellent blitzer. He's always been. So stylistically, it was a straw that stirs the drink for them. Now, that said, here's the thing. Divisional matchup. They just played each other. So Kyler threw for 285 in that game. I mean, it goes underreported. 133 of those went to Trey McBride. He threw the pick 6, didn't throw a touchdown. So it wasn't, and he didn't run for much. But here's the thing. They have just seen that defense. And Drew Petzing, if he could cook up anything, McDonald doesn't need to change up for this game. He's going to roll the same stuff he did. True. Why would he do anything differently? And I don't know that Murray's going to overcome this. But at home, Seattle plays so much better at home than they play on the road. I'm not telling you start Kyler Murray as a fantasy quarterback one with big floor and big upside, but he did throw for 285 in that game. Don't be surprised to see him put up a 18 to 20 fantasy point performance there, and maybe he gets a little more. That's all I'm going to say. But you play McBride. McBride just crushed him. James Conner did nothing on the ground, but he caught 5 for 41 in that game. So they'll use him either way. So you're fine there. I would worry about everybody else. I'd worry about Harrison. Well, who else you starting? You're not starting Michael Wilson. Right. So there's that.
Well, I think it's interesting that you say worry about everyone else, because I have reservations about DK Metcalf, the way that he's been not involved in the Seahawks offense over the past month. And not that it's coincided with JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba being involved more. I think there's a way to get both those guys involved, but we were saying that last year as well, too. And I know it's a different offensive corner who is now no longer in the NFL, different offensive scheme. But it's wild to me that the Seahawks can't get 2 or 3 of their good receivers all going in one game. It just feels impossible.
Yeah, I've mentioned over and over, I won't make this long. Ryan Grubb is a college coach. And these college coaches who are only college coaches come up coach the NFL. In college, you didn't have to make adjustments. Your players were wide open because they were better, or your scheme was so good it cooked the other team. And you just roll that same game plan out for 11 weeks and you're good. Well, in the NFL, you got to make adjustments starting in week 1. And if you're not having to make them in college, these guys in the NFL are pretty smart. And you could see this Ryan Grubb is overwhelmed. He has no idea. First 3 weeks, the spacing was great. Mm-hmm. Defenses took that away. He has had 0 counterpunch. So what you're left with is a stagnant offense. No spacing for Kenneth Walker in the backfield. DK Metcalf, I think, is playing through multiple injuries. So there's that. They have enough talent where they move the ball and they score some points. But the coaching has hindered them.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I almost wonder if the Seahawks adjust, but if they make the playoffs, why would you change things up? It'll be very, very curious decision. Kenneth Walker, it does have an injury listing right now. We'll have to see his status. If Kenneth Walker is out, all these backup quarterback or backup running back situations don't matter. It's Zach Charbonnet all the way, and you've just found Isaac Guerrero 2.0 out there. So definitely monitor the status of Kenneth Walker, and if he is out, Zach Charbonnet immediately play in your lineup, and I think he produces top 20 running back numbers. Let's go to the Bills and Rams. This one in Los Angeles, and yet the Bills favored by 3.5 after the blizzard thrashing of the Niners. Josh Allen cements best man in the world status by engaged with Haley Steinfeld and also scoring a touchdown after throwing one. Awesome stuff to see. I normally get I'm normally a Scrooge or a Grinch in this, and I'm like, okay, like the Saquon Barkley thing. He just jumped backwards spinning. Like, can we stop? The Josh Allen thing was actually really cool. Like I had zero anything in there. I wasn't hurt by it. I wasn't helped by it fantasy. I was like, okay, that was really cool. Now I like seeing the Niners suffer because they have made me as a Packer fan suffer a lot in my life. So it was very wonderful. And that felt like the end of the Niners. The Bills can do it for a second consecutive week to an NFC West team if they were to throttle the Rams, because we talk about the Cardinals and Seahawks. They might have that division more or less just between the two of them, depending on how things shake out next week. I think the Rams are set up to fail again. I think the Bills just look like a really good and sound team. And even if they aren't involving Amari Cooper or getting guys fantasy volume passing wise, they know what they are identity wise. And that's what seems to matter right now for their team.
I think the Bills are laying like right around 5 points, like 4.5, 5, right on there, laying that many points at the Rams. I think they steamroll them. So the first thing is the Rams, you never know what version you're getting. That's the problem with the Rams for fantasy. You don't know. But here's the thing. I'll tell you this. The Bills, first of all, they don't have one dominant pass rusher, but they have a whole group that can get after the quarterback. And the Rams offensive line has been a real problem, and Stafford under pressure has been a massive problem. The other thing is the Bills have been great against play action and motion, and that's what Sean McVay uses. Mm-hmm. Stylistically, this is a horrible matchup for the Rams.
Say the line, Jim. Styles make fights. Styles make fights. I need to say
right? Yes, I love it. You're catching on. I love it. So, yeah, I really think the Rams are going to struggle to move the ball here. The big corners are probably a tougher matchup for Puka Nacua. Rasul Douglas and why the other name's going to evade me, but they have two big corners, and they're very physical, and that's a bad matchup for Nacua. Other side of the ball, look, the Bills right now, they're looking inevitable. Their offensive line is good enough in the run blocking. They're better in pass pro, but Josh Allen's playing at a high level right now. And Cooper, look, weather last week, the wrist injury before, he's got to be past the wrist injury now. My guess is at some point they use him a little bit more. Kincaid hopefully comes back. We'll see how that works out. But regardless, the Rams are a nice defense, but they're schemed up. And at some point, you need Jimmys and Joes, not X's and O's to beat. And you're not going to beat Josh Allen with X's and O's if you don't have the Jimmys and Joes, and they don't.
We're gonna have to power rank the phrases that you use. We had the Avengers with the Niners offense earlier this year. The Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's is a great one every time you bust it out, and you do it just infrequently enough where it gets me to smirk every single time. I love it. Yeah, there's gonna be a different show. We could have Charlene and the rest of the chat that knows you very well be like, all right, what are top 5 Jim's phrases? Because I love it so much here. So from the Rams offense, you're playing all the studs, the Cooper Kupps, Puka Nakuas, Kyron Williams of the world. It feels like it's just Matthew Stafford, who's on the fringe of quarterback 1 territory. There's a volume element to this that, yeah, I mean, the Bills might smash it, but in that instance, the Matthew Stafford's probably throwing 50 times and might get 2 touchdowns, even in junk time. We've seen that before. So Stafford, a guy that you're fading out, like, I don't know the range of quarterbacks. Like, you're Russell Wilson over Stafford. I think it's Russell Wilson pretty clearly. Same with Jameis Winston too.
Stafford's scary because, like I said earlier, he's another one, interior pressure. He's really susceptible to that. And if they become one-dimensional and the Rams get a big lead, that's not necessarily the best thing for Matthew Stafford, because that means the pressure's coming. Because if they're one-dimensional and they're not worried about the run, they're going to send even more heat at Stafford. And that's going to be a problem. And Matt Milano is a second week back too. And believe me, with the middle of the field stuff that the Rams use in the passing game, he'll be a part of that defense, which that's scary as well. So Stafford is boom bust. You're hoping it clicks. But look, this could be an implosion game because this is a negative storm against him.
Yeah. Let's move over to the Bears and Niners. And happy for you if you won the Isaac Guerendo sweepstakes. Obviously, that was probably one of the bigger waiver wire pickups all year. And of course, happens either on the eve of the playoffs or fantasy playoffs for a lot of folks. Is Guerendo going to be an obvious immediate play that you have to have in your lineup? Or is it possible that Patrick Taylor, for example, could be more involved as a pass catcher? We know that the whims of Kyle Shanahan change by the winds, it feels like. And you invested all your waiver fab into Guerendo because all of us experts told you to. And then, it's Patrick Taylor who gets 13 fantasy points for some random reason.
So what this fantasy expert told you is this: blow your money on him because a number 1 running back does not become available in week 14 of a season. If you got money, what are you saving it for? But I said, don't expect Guerendo to set the world on fire. If Guerendo was good, he would have eaten into Jordan Mason's share of work. These were his snap percentage when Jordan Mason was healthy. Now, he hurt his shoulder in 2 games, and so Guerendo played when he was injured, when Mason was injured. 4%, 1%, 14, 8, 14, and 9. Those are the snap percentages. And it's not like Jordan Mason was getting better as the season went on. He was getting worse as the season went on. His efficiency was going down. And yet they couldn't get Guerendo in a game for 15% of the snaps. He's a boom bust runner. And his broken tackle rate, 4th percentile. 0's the worst. He's 4th. Now, his yards after contact were great. Remember, he had that 76-yard run against Seattle in the 4th quarter of a garbage time game. He can break a long run. He definitely can do that. And he had another good game against Dallas. At the time, Dallas was probably, at the time, they were the worst run defense in the league. Guerendo's not a sustaining runner. He'll get opportunities. He'll get 12 carries in this one. And for fantasy, you love it. He might get a target or 2. But Patrick Taylor is probably getting 5 to 7 touches here because it's not Jordan Mason and Guerendo. Now it's Guerendo and somebody else. And I think Guerendo's the lead. So again, you start him if you need him, but don't think you happen into Jordan Mason here early season. This is not Jordan Mason taking over from McCaffrey, who ran for like 150 against the Jets in week 1. It's not the same guy. Can Guerendo break 2 long runs? I guess he can. So there's that, but that's not going to be common for him. And Trent Williams missed last week. Now, unfortunately, poor man, they lost their daughter in birth. I feel terrible for him. And who knows if he's not in the lineup, that running game isn't going to get any blocking either.
Yeah, our guy, Mario Puig, I do the Friday show with him on SiriusXM Channel 87. You do the Saturday show with Mario Puig. He'll talk about Guerendo and liked Guerendo a lot entering the year, and I think rightfully so. There's an RAS score, like the speed factor for it. I think a 4.34 40-yard dash, like one of the faster running backs of this rookie class. But Mario will also talk about Israel Abakanda, who got the call-up. I think he's either on the practice squad and will get called up or is on the active roster with both Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey out. That was the former Jets guy that kind of got pushed out, I think, by poor decision-making. And Abakanda might be one of those two that if Guerendo were to go down, I'll be like, actually, no, spend your whole fab on him too, because he's a good, talented running back, and you want those in the Kyle Shanahan scheme. So we'll have to see when it's occurring this week. And it's tough because the Bears defense, it's good enough. And if you're losing so many pieces and just, again, we talk about the vibes all season long, but that wears on you. You think about what you and I do and what we deal with on a week-to-week basis. These NFL guys are losing. People are talking poorly about them. They've lost multiple Super Bowls in a row. That all adds up when it's cold and it's 5-8, and you probably don't have a chance at division. So I'm very curious. We've seen 3 straight weeks of Caleb Williams be a fantasy 1 quarterback. Will it be 4 against the Niners defense?
Look, I would be stunned if Nick Bosa played. Oblique injury. He's already missed time. If he's not in, they don't have a pass rush anymore. Hargrave was lost early in the season. They got nothing. And that Bears offensive line is not going to be tested here. Fred Warner playing on what was a broken ankle or whatnot. They're down a ton of people. And they're getting the ball out quick. And you got Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Charvarius Ward's working his way back from a personal matter. Another tough situation that we know of. And but yeah, I think that the Bears were able to do some damage here. And you could run on this team too. So actually, Swift is not a great fantasy play, but he has a high floor this week. 49ers can't stop the run anymore.
Yeah, it's entirely true. I think Caleb Williams, absolutely. Would you play Caleb over Jameis Winston? I got to keep going back to that because that's my barometer of like quarterback 14 or 15.
Yeah, Caleb's been running. It's at least 30 yards in 3 straight games with a 70 in there. I bet the over on that on Thanksgiving Day. I had all 6 of my props in the locker article. Oh my gosh, it was a big day. Yeah, big day.
Nice. Anyway, I like that. I was going to say from now we have no Eberflus. Obviously had we have talked this whole time. I haven't talked about the Eberflus thing. That's fine. That's not what this show's about, but it is funny. Now Thomas Brown, who only 3 weeks ago was like the offensive coordinator specialist, now is now the head coach of the team. That's a pretty big leap. And my only concern would be he just got this offense right and now has about a month and a half addition to be the head coach of the Bears. There's probably other priorities, but I would assume the ownership and Ryan Poles would say, head coach Brown, you are going to be the head coach next year or have the best chance if you keep making Caleb Williams look good. Prioritize anything else. Just make Caleb Williams continue to look as good as he has. So there's part of that's in my mind. Again, we talk about real life things. It's tough to do that sort of career advancement in a month and then expect everything to just keep operating the same way. But that's the one thing that has to keep operating the same way for him to be in a spot to be successful next year.
Yeah, but Thomas Brown will not be the head coach. This is a plum job. The Bears are going to have their choice, and people are going to want to coach Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson has a great chance of being the coach here. They're going to get an established coach who can coach some offense. And I know the Bears organization has made stupid decisions since I live in Chicago, since I've been born. But I think this time they're going to have no choice but to make a fair decision and get somebody in. If they make it Thomas Brown, it wouldn't surprise me Chicago would do something like that and make a big mistake. If they have a chance to hire like a real big-time NFL coach.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's gonna be a lot of different guys out there. There's still Belichick and Vrabel. Not that Belichick's coming to Chicago, but like there's a lot of big enough names that you're entirely right. Let's go over to the Chargers Chiefs. We have 2 games left on the Week 14 slate. We've already talked about this a little bit. The Ladd McConkey injuries, now plural, with the shoulder and the knee sprain, are significant. This is the guy that caught 9 of Herbert's 16 completions last week. Disley got 0. Johnston got 1. Palmer was hardly involved. And this was a game in which the Chargers won. Now it's because Kirk Cousins gave it away, but still, without what my biggest concern I wanted to find out last week, and we didn't because Kirk Cousins stunk, was is this Chargers offense just now bad because they lose the play action element without J.K. Dobbins? Because that's something that really now matters for the next 3 weeks. We might still not learn that because if it's no Ladd McConkey, we're talking about Johnston, Palmer, and the corpse of DJ Chark, who has not at all played despite being active really since week 10 as your top 3 receivers. You can try to do play action all you want. Even a bad enough pass defense can lock that down. And that the Chargers are really operating with that with minimal injuries to the receiving core speaks to, I thought, a bad decision-making process in the receivers they acquired this offseason. Of course, that doesn't matter. Harbaugh wanted to commit to the running attack. We've seen that. But what happens here in the event that Vidal and Gus Edwards don't get going? Because this could be the Chiefs just finally blowing a team out.
Yeah, I'm terrified about the Chargers offense here. Dobbins really was a straw that stirred the drink because we know that Harbaugh wanted that run game to be a component. Even when it wasn't going well, they were going to commit to the run. Like you said, it runs play action, but Dobbins added an explosive element to the run game. We could say what we want about Vidal. it's not the J.K. Dobbins. And so they're going to be, if they're going to try to run, they're going to be in bad down and distance situations. And look, if McConkey is playing less than 100%, and I can't tell you what a coach is going to do, but I would have to think Spagnuolo is going to take Trent McDuffie, who can play slot or outside. And in this game, with the weapons, lack of weapons, I think they're just going to put McDuffie on him. McDuffie's an excellent corner. And I think with an injured knee and an injured shoulder, that would be enough to slow down McConkey. And at that point, it's the Will Dissly show, because the Chiefs can't cover tight ends, but right. Will Dissly isn't going to beat you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a scenario in which the Chiefs kind of smashed. Somebody had said LIV McConkey was limited in practice yesterday. I think what you and I are trying to say, and McDuffie erasing McDonkey's healthy is, oh my God, whatever. That's not surprising. But if you're operating at, 80%, I know everyone is in the NFL at this point of the year, but
right.
both a shoulder issue and a knee sprain, you can be limited in practice all you want. Like, that's going to matter when you are suiting up come Sunday. Like, you just aren't going to be 100%. And if you already have a good corner on you, like LIV McConkey's going to have, but that's a tough spot to be in. Not that you have to play McConkey if he's active.
Oh, 100%,
but I just think this Chargers
100%.
offense is going to be really struggling, and the Chiefs are only favored by 4 at this point.
Right. And you know what? The Chiefs rarely cover anything, but I actually like them this week because, see, here's the problem with the Chargers. Chargers are a great defense. They're well coached. They play 3 safety looks a lot. They blanket the top. They're vulnerable to teams that will put a power running attack at you. And we've seen the Chiefs, 2 tight ends, sometimes 3 tight ends. They're going to load up. That's exactly what the Chargers are vulnerable to. Look, the Chiefs are not the Ravens, but the Ravens kind of showed us that blueprint. Just mash them up. They're too small. We're going downhill, and eventually we're going to break the dam. Well, the Chiefs will be hammering away at that dam all day long. And I just think, again, with no Dobbins and a limited at best McConkey, I do think for once the Chiefs actually cover a number.
Yeah, I'm with you. Final game of the Week 14 slate: Bengals versus Cowboys. 4-8 Bengals, 5-7 Cowboys. I'm sure when ESPN saw this on the schedule, they were just salivating. All right, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Week 14. They're going to matter playoff-wise, both these teams. Well, not really the case. The Bengals are favored by 5.5. I think it's entirely possible that you're saying the Cowboys can cover. We had mentioned Cooper Rush's. If you could do a lot worse streaming quarterback-wise, 6 teams on bye, given how bad the Bengals defense is. Now, CeeDee Lamb status is going to really matter. We heard Jerry Jones's comments earlier this week saying that the extra day is going to help CeeDee Lamb and that Jerry Jones would expect CeeDee Lamb to play. I don't think Jerry Jones knows what time or day it is at any point that he's ever talking, so I don't trust him for a second for what he's saying. But let's assume Lamb is playing. The Cowboys would probably be the favored approach to cover at least, right?
You know, the Bengals are interesting. And I pointed this out since Parsons is back. And there's no smart statement because everybody knows it. But since Parsons has been back, that whole defense is different because of the pressure. But this is a Bengals team that's used to playing TJ Watt every year. And the whole Alex Highsmith missed last week.
Sure.
They're used to facing Watt and Highsmith. And yet they're fine because Burrow gets it out quickly. He's got Chase. He's got Higgins. And they know the pressure's coming, so they just get it out quick. And Burrow can do that. Put him in the gun and say, okay, you got an extra quarter second to throw. And that's going to happen here. The Bengals are going to move the ball without any problem. And that Chase Brown is a screen outlet. Oh, my gosh. How wonderful is that, right? The pressure comes, dump it off to Chase Brown. Oh, look, there's 10 yards of space. So I think the Bengals score plenty of points here. Cowboys will have to chase. I do think if CD's on the field, obviously, you're not even considering benching him. You're starting him. But and Ferguson's back. I think there'll be some opportunities for him on the seam.
Brandon Cooks, too. Somebody in the chat asked about Brandon Cooks, and I thought that's kind of an interesting name given this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to be – so I really expect Anarumo to try to dial up pressure if they have a lead. And they haven't been getting it a lot, but they got Hendrickson. And if they send extra bodies on the other side, getting out quick is going to be the formula. And who does that mean? Well, they use CD in the slot a lot, Ferguson in the seam. Those are the quick – this is where your eyes are at. When the pressure's coming, the easy place to see is I got my reads here. You don't have time necessarily to work to the outside, especially Cooper Rush. So I'm a little pessimistic on Brandon Cooks here. And remember, last week was a lot of short stuff. And that's not what Brandon Cooks is going to put you on the fantasy stat sheet. I know he got the 3-yard touchdown, but that's not where he's going to get you for fantasy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We'll have to see. It's a bad Monday Night Football game, but it might matter fantasy wise a lot. And obviously, whether it be the fantasy playoffs for you or the eve of the fantasy playoffs, best of luck. Obviously, the nearly 600 people listening live, watching this. We'll be doing the show again next week, doing the weekly previews. Jim's will get you set on the start sit. We've had a few more of those trickle in. Just a reminder: Sunday at 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Would be bad. That'd be not good. 11 a.m. Eastern time, Jim on this very network here, the RotoWire YouTube channel, will get you set with the start sit at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter. You can always ask him questions. You can ask me too, but I would always say Jim's the man. He's got you covered there at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter with your questions. Again, thanks everyone for listening. Back in next week.